I recently spent a few days in Amsterdam, and before going to Amsterdam, I had had a certain perception of what Amsterdam was going to be like from pictures and books, especially The Fault in Our Stars. However, when I got there, I found Amsterdam wasn't exactly what I thought it was. I thought Amsterdam was this beautiful, sunny city with brick houses running all along the sparkling canals and everyone traveling on bikes. I expected to see tulips everywhere. There's a quote in The Fault in Our Stars that says, Amsterdam was a city designed for movement and activity, a city that would rather not travel by car, and so inevitably I felt excluded from it. But God was it beautiful. That's part of what I was expecting from the city. And yes, the city has a sinful side from the red light district and certain things that are legal there. But while those things didn't interest me, knowing they were there added a flair of adventure to what I thought Amsterdam was like. Pretty much, I had over romanticized this beautiful place in my mind. And it was that to a certain extent, but at the same time, it was something completely different. It wasn't a bad different, it was just different. It was cold and rainy, and the streets were dirty sometimes. And even though the city is so well known for its sinful ways, I realized that this wasn't a main aspect of Amsterdam, but neither were the canals and the tulips that made up the picture of the city that I'd had in my head. It was more than that. It wasn't as sunny, sinful, or happy as what I'd thought. It was just a city. And that's all that it was. Yes, it was unique from other cities in Europe, but it was still just like every other city with the hustle and bustle and beauty and bits of ugliness. And as I walked through Vondel Park, I thought about my fantasy of Amsterdam and the reality of Amsterdam. What had my fantasy become now that I had seen the reality? Was my fantasy no longer relevant? I couldn't help thinking about how, for a lot of my trip to Amsterdam, I was thinking about a fictional book. I went to Vondel Park and the Anne Frank house and thought some about Augustus and Hazel from The Fault in Our Stars. They're completely fictional, and yet it was a large part of my trip to Amsterdam. And I couldn't also help thinking that the fantasies that you have are also just as important as the realities. Ugh. I don't think if I hadn't had the fantasy of Amsterdam that the reality of what it was would have hit me quite as hard. So for that reason, I wasn't disappointed Amsterdam didn't quite live up to the fantasy I'd had. My fantasy was still important, and I now had a reality to go along with the fantasy.